Buenas, we are back in session. The special session 16-S is hereby reconvened in the Committee of the Whole. The document on your desk has been passed out. It was handed to me by Mr. Carlson of the BBMR in response to some of our questions last week. Spreadsheet, it's titled OFB's Summary of Impacts of TCJA on Government of Guam Income Tax Revenues FY 2018. And then all right. All right, when we left off, Senator Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I believe it was Sunday that we passed out some amendments. Unfortunately, the first amendment didn't pass. The amendment to lift certain exemptions, as well as recalculating or changing the formula on the way banks are assessed on their BPT. And really, that effort, Madam Chair, was to replace the provisions of Bill 16-S, which was to raise the BPT from 4% to 6%, in order for us to address the shortfall, at least partially, the $67 million shortfall that we expect this fiscal year. And so, since we don't have that in front of us, and this body has voted, at least in the past, to reject such increase. We know that during the past few days, some certain drastic measures have been taken by the governor. And really this is the governor's authority to manage the operations of the executive branch. And really it's our authority here and our responsibility to set the funding priorities of our government. And as crazy, I'm sorry to say it, but as crazy as it is for police precincts and for fire stations to be shut down, this is something that this body should not be taking lightly. And although it is the prerogative of the governor to do these things, we need to do everything we could to avert any further erosion of critical services to our people. I'm sure the others here have getting calls from constituents, especially from those working in the hospital, working in the fire department, in the police station, to have our police officers who arrest suspects and now are charged to watching them inside DOC, inside their cells, really is chaos. And so we need to, in the absence of an effort to pass what the governor is asking us to do, which is an increase in BPT, we need to ensure that we do everything we could to avert any further drastic measures. And so that's why, Madam Chair, the amendments that I had proposed or have submitted to the body for their consideration takes some drastic measures of our own as well. And I want to premise this, at least the statements on these amendments by first speaking directly to our legislative employees here. These are the backbone of our operations, whether here at Central or our individual offices. And it's with a very heavy heart that I propose this amendment. This amendment would defund the funding for our body, for the Guam Legislature, and it's there's impact to that. And for myself, and I think for 14 of us here who prepared ourselves, who signed up for this kind of days like these where we're going to need to take the sacrifice. It's less of an impact for us, although I'm not saying it's not an impact, but for our staff who didn't sign up for this, who didn't sign up for days like these where we're going to ask them to to sacrifice with us. But there's one thing that I want to say to our staff is that our existence in this office comes from the people who placed their trust in us, who had faith in us to look out for their best interests. And if that means that we have to take on this ultimate sacrifice of shutting down the operations of this body to ensure that no further police precincts are closed, no further fire stations are shut down, that our nurses at GMH are not going to worry about in 90 days or 80 some more days since receiving the 90-day notice that they're going to be placed on a 32-hour work week. Or for that teacher last week who my son came home and told me, he goes, my son he goes to a public school and says, Daddy, my teacher said, please ask your daddy to save my job. That's not for our kids to wonder what is going on. That's not for our teachers, for them to worry about whether their school is going to be closed or whether their hours are going to be cut. Their only concern should be educating our kids in our school. And if that's the type of leadership we have right now, Madam Chair, that is causing this type of chaos, confusion, and as I said earlier, craziness in our community, because we can't come to some middle ground in finding a solution. We can't lift the exemptions on banks, and we can't lift exemptions on insurance companies, then these are the things that unfortunately we have to be able to pursue. And so I've asked legal counsel to, sorry, I was on a podcast earlier, so I got to turn that off. I've asked legal counsel to amend or to revise the amendment that I had earlier today. I have it here. But basically, these are 6 amendments that I separated, but I'm asking for your indulgence that if we can perhaps do it as one amendment, if that's all right with you. But I'll just summarize what these amendments would do. The amendments would unfund the governor's office except for $100,000, which the governor can use to fund a scaled-down operation. It unfunds the legislature except for $100,000 for scaled-down operations as well. It discontinues the authorization for the governor and the legislature to use funds that lapse from previous years' unused appropriations. It prohibits any spending on the salaries and benefits of all but a select group of directors and deputy directors of the executive branch. These appropriations and continuing appropriations will be restored if and when the governor revokes any and all notices of furloughs or reduction in force and certify that a fiscal crisis is no longer exist. It also prohibits anyone displaced by these policies from cashing in their annual leave hours that have accrued. And so by doing this, Madam Chair, it's estimated to save at least $15 million of at least what we have for this fiscal year. It's not far short from the $67 million that we need to find. However, I'm hoping that with the passage of this amendment, that it would avert any further shutdown of a critical service in our community. And so the only amendment that I'd like to proffer to our body is on after every section that we have here is that the effective date of this amendment. And if I may read it, Madam Chair. It says, effective midnight, March 6, 2018, all but $100,000 of the unused appropriation authority from the general fund appropriation, net of personal costs encumbered through 5 p.m. March 2nd, 2018, is revoked and shall expire when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education are restored. And so that is, it just makes it clear. I know that some of my colleagues had some concerns on how the language on the effective date of these provisions would take place. And so we had legal counsel assist in providing a little bit more clarity to the effective date of each of these sections that I would like to proffer.
Could you please read that language one more time, Senator? And does the clerk have that? Okay. Just please read it into the record one more time.
There are 6 amendments that are
no, I mean
6
the
different
amendment
pages,
to
but
your
the effective date
yeah.
would be effective midnight, March 6, 2018. All but 100,000 of the unused appropriation authority from the general fund appropriation, net of personnel costs encumbered through 5 p.m. March 2nd, 2018 is revoked and shall expire when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education are restored. So that's basically when our police precincts can function at the services that we were providing, the Hagåtña precinct, the PD and Estumbo fire stations are reopened, and normal operations can be had in these areas, and that we really don't know what other types of measures are going to be taken, but we're hoping that with this amendment and the funds that will be saved by doing this, that any further reductions would take place.
All right. So, first of all, if I may ask the body, can we consider all at once this amendment to all the amendments? This one amendment that will change the effective date of all these amendments? And then I will ask you if you agree to consider all these amendments as one or separate. But for this one amendment to all the amendments, is there any objection to treating them together? Yes. So on the effective date, Senator Rodriguez, would you do us the honors of repeating the language one more time? The effective date, it's all one sentence right now, but he's changing part of it. Please. I think it's after the words, right?
So it's, if you want to read it again, I'll read it again, Madam Chair.
Could you, before you read it, tell us where in the copies we have in front of us the change is being made? Okay,
so perhaps we'll do the first one in the reduction in appropriation to the governor's office. We can start with that amendment.
Are they all different on the different amendments?
Well, there's one for the governor's office, one for the legislature.
No, but do you intend that this effective date
will be the same
for all? That's okay.
That's correct.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so on the effective date is effective midnight, March 6, 2018. All but 100,000 of the unused appropriation authority from the general fund appropriation, net of personnel costs encumbered through 5 p.m. March 2nd, 2018 is revoked and shall expire when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting...
If you could just stop right there. So in our copies, we have shall expire up to the words shall expire, and then the language changes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so could you start at that point? Is everybody clear? So through 5 p.m. March 2, 2018 is revoked and shall expire, and now we have a change. Okay, please, Senator Rodriguez.
Expire when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education are restored.
Is there any question as to the proposed amendment to all the amendments, the effective date? All right, so on that, Senator San Augustine.
Madam Chair, is it possible that all his amendments he's asking for, take a short recess, have it redone, and then pass it all so we can all agree to it? We'll be writing all over this document.
Well, this is just one amendment for the effective date, and it will apply to all documents the same effective date. That's the intention of this one amendment. So those words will change for all the pages in front of you. Same words for all pages. Or at least the two.
Just for the two, Madam Chair.
Yeah, for the two. For the governor's office and the all right.
If you're comfortable with it, I mean, fine.
It's okay?
We do it, it'll be okay.
The wording one more time, Senator Rodriguez. Okay. On the line, everybody please go to the line through 5 p.m. March 2, 2018 is revoked and shall expire. And Senator Rodriguez.
Shall expire, and so we are deleting while, starting from the word while, and replacing it when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education.
We could just go slower.
Okay.
Again, so when Imagalahi issues a notice.
Issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education are restored.
Is there any question as to what we are discussing? So we are deleting the words while any reduction all the way to the end of the sentence in effect. We're deleting those words, replacing those words with when Imagalahi issues a notice that reductions in critical services affecting public health, safety, and education are restored. All right, so on this amendment to the effective date, is there any objection? Senator Urgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And if I can just pose a question with regards to the amendment to the amendment. So my understanding here is that net of all personnel costs, that in this case, as it applies to the office of the governor, that he would only have $100,000 for the balance of the fiscal year, until such time that he otherwise provides notice that public safety, health, and education are no longer affected. Is that correct?
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to that question?
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Yes, that's correct, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. On the amendment to the amendment, on the effective date, is there any objection to this amendment to the amendment? All right, no objection, so ordered. So on the, is there now any objection to treating all these amendments as one? All right, there's an objection, so we will divide that. All right, and divide,
Point of order.
Yes, Senator Espadon, please state your point of order.
Well, just to be clear, the motion on the floor right now is to take all these 6 or 7, whatever amendments that the good senator had passed out and make it into one complete amendment. I believe that kind of is the implied motion, or at least the motion
The
that was
motion is
made.
to adopt them as in one vote.
Correct.
Yes.
And so there was an objection.
Right.
And so the point of order is that we need to vote on whether or not we should consolidate all of these amendments into one amendment. And that's what we need to vote on. Just a point of order.
Do you want to vote? All right. On the motion to consolidate all 6 amendments and vote on them at once, is there any there was an objection? So on that,
Madam Speaker.
On that motion?
Madam Chair, before we even vote on it, I believe we all have the opportunity to speak on the motion.
On the motion to consolidate or not?
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm asking if there's anybody. Senator Espadon.
You know, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the problems is if we agree with 1 or 2 of these motions and don't agree with the others, then how do we vote? And I understand, you know, some of them, I mean, because they're different in nature. Right? These 2 that we had just discussed in terms of change of the date, of the effective date, basically is one thing. And then there's another amendment that's going to be included in all these amendments that then would, you know, no longer authorize continuing appropriations. So the question then becomes that when we get to, if all these separate amendments are consolidated into one, I think it would only be right that we bifurcate each and every one of them. So in other words, we address each of these issues in itself. So I don't see any benefit of incorporating them all into one if we're going to try to bifurcate and discuss each and every one individually. So I would support the objection.
All right, anyone else would like to speak on this motion to consolidate? All right, if not, all in favor of consolidating the 6 amendments into one, please raise your hand. All right, motion fails. All right, so Senator Rodriguez, the first motion will be, we will take the
Can I do the first one?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the first amendment would be on, it would be the reduction in appropriation to Liheslatura. And so, as we've discussed, that this would now reduce the appropriations to $100,000 for the legislature, effective midnight tonight.
On the motion, does everybody know the amendment? All right, is there any discussion on this motion?
Which amendment, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Which
Senator Munoz?
Which amendment are we
It's the one that begins reduction in appropriation to Liheslatura.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Senator Urgan, on the amendment?
Just in regards to the application of this particular amendment, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Speaker, the question I have is if you take a look at the top portion, the first paragraph, it enumerates the amount that's being appropriated to that particular entity, in this case, the Office of the Governor. And then in the same section, we have effective midnight, all but 100,000 of the unused appropriation. So I'm looking at it as contradictory in nature. One says this amount is appropriated, the additional subparagraph says, incidentally, all but $100,000 net of personnel costs is available. So there may have to be, in order to effectuate this provision, or to allow it to be effectuated as the sponsor would like, perhaps a notwithstanding provision may have to be applicable within the subsection.
Are you making a motion to amend this amendment?
I'm trying to seek some guidance in regards to this because it
you like
really
to add
appears
the-
contradictory in nature for me to look at this in one fell swoop and say in Section 5, $8.1 million is allocated to the governor's office, and then in the subparagraph it says only 100,000 net personnel costs. So it's somewhat contradictory. So yes, I would like to seek legal counsel's guidance in terms of the appropriate verbiage to allow for this subsection to take effect in spite of the appropriation amount up top.
Senator Rodriguez, we will ask legal counsel, but did you have it?
But does the sponsor understand my concern? I mean, if
Yes,
if he feels it can still be effectuated, then I'm okay.
Yes.
It's just that
Or would you want to suggest adding the words notwithstanding? Is that what you were alluding to? All right. Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to this question?
Okay. So just to be clear, the first one we're doing is the reduction in appropriation to Liheslatura. And so the language above is the current budget law, the language of current budget law. And so what we are proposing to add into that current budget law is the language with the effective date and the reduction in the 100,000.
Thank you. And council has advised that the language looks appropriate as is, or you could add the words notwithstanding any other provision of law. So Senator Urgan, you have the floor.
I'm good with that explanation there, ma'am. If the legal counsel feels that it can still be effectuated by virtue of adding that amended version in the section, then I'm good with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On the amendment, Senator Ada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I understand what this amendment's doing. So what I understand is that basically we're going to shut down the governor's office, and we're going to shut down the legislature with the next.
This amendment, but everyone, is on the legislature. This is...
Okay, the legislature, and then the next one is on the governor's office. So maybe if the author would, the mover of the amendment would yield, I just want to make sure that what I'm reading is what I understand it to be, that it basically will shut down the legislature. All but $100,000. Maybe that's to pay for the power bills that's coming due and all that. And then we're going to move on to the next amendment, and it's going to shut down the governor's office. And I'm just trying to understand what is accomplished by that. So maybe if the mover of the amendment would yield.
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the senator for the question. Yes, he's absolutely correct. The intent is to shut down Adaloop, and his intention is to shut down this legislature. If we are allowing for critical services such as fire and police services to be degraded, and the threat of further reductions in the healthcare, and soon after in the classrooms, then we have to be able to say, well, we can't let that happen. And if it's because the funding shortfall that we're going to experience throughout this fiscal year is going to require us to do those things, then the priority should be what we've always said it was: health, safety, and education. And so this one, I'm not saying, and I premise this by speaking to our staffs and saying that this is not saying that our staffs are not critical or not needed, because these are the support, and that's what gives me the pain in doing what I have to do. However, it's doing this or allowing a governor and a lieutenant governor to allow for critical services to be reduced in our community.
Senator Ada, you have the floor.
Well, I thank you to the mover of the amendment for clarifying that. However, I really have I guess I just would have to object to the amendment. I certainly disagree that that this is a solution to what is going on right now. Thank you.
On the Rodriguez amendment to Liheslatura, Senator Morrison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the previous speaker's sentiments regarding this amendment, and I think we're losing focus on the overall impact of the federal tax cut that is depleting our revenues to this government, Madam Chair. And I think with a measure of this, as the previous speaker mentioned, shutting down this branch of government, and shutting down the governor's office, I think needs further legal guidance. I still believe that there should be due process for these employees. This is basically exempting or bypassing furloughs and sending these employees home. So I'm very concerned that this amendment is proceeding without further legal guidance. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the amendment? So there's been Senator Espaldon.
I just need to ask a question on this one. It says net of personnel cost. I'm not really sure what that means. Does that mean that all the funds that have been appropriated, except monies that are supposed to go to paying personnel, all that money, aside from personnel costs, is no longer available? Is that what it is? So the employees get paid. I mean, again, I'm just trying to understand what the dynamics are here, because the explanation was given that this is an attempt to basically close the services of the legislature and the governor's office. Eventually, we'll get to that amendment. But if the people are still getting paid, and again, I just need to understand exactly what he intends.
If I may just point out, encumbered through 5 p.m. March 2.
Okay. Oh, so those personnel costs only up to that point. After that, then there's no other funding. Do we know how much this would actually save?
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to that
What's
question?
available?
Thank you very much. We're looking at least for the legislature, about $5 million for the rest of the fiscal year.
And so does that mean that if we do pass this amendment, that the public hearings that are scheduled for all the other revenue enhancements that or cost containments that we've been talking about are no longer going to be held?
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to that question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll show up. I'll be here to listen to the testimonies. If we have to, we'll be here to run
that yes or no?
the systems that need to be run for that public hearing.
Senator Espaldon, you
If
have
we're
the floor.
not, we all could be here, all the senators could be here to listen, but if there's nothing, if we have no employees to assist in the whole process, to gather the reports, to be able to do all the things they do, they come in before us, they leave after us, and where exactly is the efficacy in this? I'm not sure. There's a lot of work to be done. Even if we pass the governor's bill as proposed right now, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Or if there's an amendment to the present bill existing before us, and it's not to that level that the governor wants, he may not. There's no guarantee that even if he gets a good compromise, that he will not give notice that the reduction in critical services, has been restored, because there might still be a reduction in critical services, even if it's at a lower level of the nature that he has right now. So it may not, and I'm just still not sure of the intelligence of this whole move. So I object.
On the amendment, Senator Lee, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A point of information, if I could.
Please state your point of information.
So we will be considering this amendment first for the legislature, is that correct?
Correct.
And then proceeding
Yes.
amendments for the governor's office?
Correct.
I guess my question is, if the office of the governor has already encumbered all of Adaloop's personnel costs before today's date, then this amendment wouldn't necessarily shut down Adaloop, would it?
Are you asking
That's
the
the
sponsor
question.
to yield?
Yes, yes.
All right. Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to that question?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, can you repeat it? Because I thought it was a point of information.
I apologize. If the office of the governor has already encumbered all of Adaloop's personnel costs or personnel funds before March 2nd, then this motion wouldn't necessarily shut down Adaloop because the funds have already been encumbered. Is that correct?
Point of order, Madam Chair. Right now, and I with all due
State your point of order, please.
with all due respect, right now we're talking about the shutdown of the legislature.
I think
not
she's just
necessarily-
asking a hypothetical. I'll
Right,
allow
no,
it.
so it's my understanding that this amendment before us addresses the legislature, but preceding amendments address the office of the governor and other entities in our government. And there are several amendments here. And so before proceeding with this initial amendment, I just want to kind of figure out for the preceding agencies that we're going to be going down this road, do we have an idea of what's been encumbered so far? Senator
Rodriguez, do you still agree to yield to this question?
Sure,
Please
thank you.
proceed.
Thank you. I don't know what has been encumbered so far, but the amendment is clear, is that what is being encumbered up to March 2nd is what is being what's being authorized to be paid, and after that, that's when it's revoked.
All right, Senator Lee, you have the floor.
No further questions, Madam Chair.
Senator Adai, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. So if I understand this correctly, I mean, you know, you take away all the dressings and all that, and we're basically gonna disencumber, basically take away all the funds that has been appropriated to keep employees on board here at the legislature for the remainder of the fiscal year. By not making those funds available, we are effectively furloughing employees. The same thing that the governor tried to do on the executive branch, but there are certain rules in place that if you're going to furlough employees, you need to give them certain time off. So isn't that effectively what we are doing here? We're mandating a furlough? Maybe if the author would yield.
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield to that question?
Thank you very much. And you know, we are in uncertain times. We are in unusual times. And the fact of the matter is, you know, both branches, you know, these are political hires. And I'm not, you know, these are they're worth every penny we pay them. They are the reasons why our body operates. They are the reason why my office operates, is the people that I have. And so I'm not discounting anything. But that's the nature of where we're at. And look, do we do this, or do we allow more police precincts to be closed, or more fire stations to be closed? What's next? Is it going to be our schools? Is it going to be the hospital, public health, the community health center? I don't know. We've seen the threats. I've seen it. If we don't pass an increase or something that they would accept, more drastic measures will be made.
On the amendment, is there anyone else who would like to speak on the amendment? Senator Urgan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. That's one of the reasons why, Madam Chair, I did ask the sponsor to yield with regards to the phrase net of personnel costs, because based on the response that was provided at that time, I was left with the impression that aside from personnel costs, as of March 2nd, 2018, then the operational budget for the balance of the fiscal year automatically dwindles to $100,000. So that was the interpretation or the impression I got by virtue of the response. Now I'm hearing a different interpretation, that this would zero out the budget to $100,000, and it would directly affect the personnel from that perspective. So I'm trying to reconcile my train of thought, Madam Chair, because if the issue is to look at net of personnel costs, set that aside, operational funds is now dwindled to $100,000 for the balance of the fiscal year for the next 6 months, then that is forcing the issue. And the sponsor of the amendment would be accomplishing his objective. And that is ensuring that we tighten the budget where decisions ultimately are rendered in this body and out of the office of the governor and the lieutenant governor, until such time that we can commit that we've reduced our budget, we've consolidated agencies, we've consolidated and reorganized this government, and then assured the public that education, public safety, and healthcare will no longer be sacrificial lambs as a result of this discussion on the fiscal challenges that we are faced with. So based on my initial understanding of the response that I received, Madam Chair, the objective would be accomplished net of personnel costs, because you would automatically, I mean, even the sponsor of this amendment said for the legislature itself could possibly result in significant cost reduction and savings, which could otherwise go to these agencies. So they don't have to incur a $12 million reduction in education, a $2.7 million reduction in fire department, or $2.5 million reduction in GPD. Entities that cannot absorb these costs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On the amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the amendment? All right, there's been an objection to the amendment, so all those in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment fails. Senator Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. You know, the rationale behind having all of these amendments into one was to ensure that what we're trying to do, which is to find as much savings so that critical services could continue to be provided to our people, really just won't work. You know, this was a serious attempt, a genuine attempt to be able to address the situation that we have in front of us. And this was not meant to pit the governor's office against the legislature or our people here against the cabinet, because one of the amendments here is to end the funding for cabinet members. And so I'm really just lost for words. We didn't want to tax and have an industry pay their fair share of taxes. We didn't want to close down the legislature or Adelup. And 10 of us here said no to BPT increase. We heard the administration tell us, even if we pass a sales tax later this week, that's not going to help. So, you know, I know that our colleagues here, I've heard a lot of good ideas that have been brought forward. Great ideas by our colleagues here. But I'm just afraid that our inaction here and not being able to be the real leaders and setting the funding priorities of our government is going to jeopardize our community. And so with the failure of at least the attempt to shut down this body, I really see there's really nothing else for us to do. I mean, are we going to now pit the governor's office against us? And that's not what I want to do. We don't need any more division from the division that we've been seeing these past few weeks. We need to come together. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I withdraw the other amendments.
All right, thank you, Senator Rodriguez. On the bill, Senator Morrison on the bill. All right, so everyone, I'm going to recognize, I kind of have lost, I don't have the record of who's been recognized already on this bill, so I'm going to, I guess, allow, since we're in committee of the whole, to recognize each of you one more time. Oh, I'm sorry, and Senator Urgan had his hand up before you forgot. Senator Urgan, please proceed. On the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a proposal that I'd like to share with our colleagues. And you know what's interesting? Please ensure the chair gets a copy first. Madam Chair, is you take a look at the ultimate decision that has to be rendered. And during the course of the last several weeks, one of the suggestions that I've hinted at members of the administration, inclusive of members of this body, is that we really have to start from the top. We have to start from the top in terms of recognizing and realizing some cost reductions. What I do have, Madam Chair, is an amendment that would read, notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule or regulation, policy or procedure, pay plan or compensation plan to the contrary, the salaries of all appointed officials whose positions are set forth in the attached Exhibit A shall be restored to the respective salary rates that existed prior to the enactment of Public Law 32-208. The salaries of the Chief of Police and Fire Chief shall be set pursuant to Public Law 32-203. Madam Chair, if you turn the page over, it has the exhibit of all the positions that it would affect and revert all the salaries back to pre-Competitive Wage Act. We have to start from the top. And that's the reality of what we are faced with. If we're going to ask our employees, to me, to even hint at taking a cost reduction, and we don't start from the top, then it's just not the right message that we are sending to our employees, our classified employees, as well as to the entire community. So, Madam Chair, I put this forth. There was a fiscal note that was provided early last year with regards to the impact that this provision would have, and the figure that was provided at that time is that it would realize a cost reduction / a cost savings to the government of Guam of approximately $503,000. So, Madam Chair, I proffer this amendment, and I ask my colleagues for your support, and let's ensure that it all starts from the top. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
On the amendment, Senator Lee, and then Senator Esteves.
Point of inquiry, Madam Chair. If the mover of the amendment has an idea about the total cost or the total amount that could be saved to this government, should we move forward with this amendment?
I believe he stated $503,000.
503 for all of the...
Senator Urgan, do you yield?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for that question. In a fiscal note that was provided under a piece of legislation that was introduced earlier, part of this term, dated February 21st, 2017, it highlighted the cost for the restoration of salary, cabinet members and executive branch leadership back to pre-competitive wage is $503,118. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Another point of inquiry. In the proposed amendment, it states the salaries of all appointed officials, and then it refers to Exhibit A, but it's my understanding that some of these positions are not appointed, or not all of the positions listed here are appointed.
Senator Urgan, do you yield to that question?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Senator. If you take a look at it, it highlights all the positions in Exhibit A, so if you want clarity, you have an amendment that would ensure that the positions that are reflected in the back of the proposed amendment in Exhibit A, it would affect, and that's the intent of the amendment, all of those positions.
I just wanted to acknowledge, though, that not all of these positions are appointed.
All
Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator Lee? Yeah. Done. Okay, so Senator Esteves, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the sponsor would yield to a question regarding...
State your question.
Yes. If in fact it is the intent of this amendment to reduce or restore respective salary rates prior to the enactment of 32-208, is there any particular reason why we're not including the Chief Justices on the third branch of government, considering already the legislature and Chief Executive have already gone back to pre-Competitive Wage Act salaries? Is there any particular reason we're exempting the judiciary in this fiscal crisis, Madam Chair? If the sponsor of the amendment will yield to the question.
Would you yield to that question, Senator Urgan? Do you yield?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for that question. If you take a look at the verbiage that's provided in here, it's specific to the positions effectuated or affected by virtue of the passage of Public Law 32-208. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Senator Esteves, on the amendment, you're recognized.
I thank the sponsor of the amendment for answering my questions. That's all I have at this time, Madam Chair.
On the amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the amendment, on the Urgan amendment? Senator Muña.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the sponsor of this amendment would consider maybe giving us copies of the fiscal note to show the savings. I don't know if it's a breakdown of every single appointed official or... I'd like to request a copy.
All right, so noted. Is that available, Senator Urgan?
What I would do, Madam Chair, because I did reference the fiscal note, the total amount was approximately $1.9 million, which was inclusive of the senatorial savings of approximately $579,000, which we enacted by virtue of the passage of legislation early last year. It also included the $1.9 million was inclusive of the governor and the lieutenant governor getting their appropriate restoration of pay to prior competitive wage. So that figure was broken down to extract the cabinet members and the executive branch positions, and the figure came out to $503,118. So if you want a copy of the fiscal note, which highlights the $1.9 million, by all means, I can share that, provide that, but that's inclusive. Be mindful that that was inclusive of all the other positions that I just mentioned.
Senator Muñoz on the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I was just curious to see what the breakdown was of each individual's salary and what the breakdown would be. But I guess if that's the total amount, then that copy wouldn't really suffice to what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Right. On the amendment, Senator Adai, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make an amendment. On the second line, where it reads, towards the end of that sentence there, the salaries of all, and add the words elected and appointed officials. So it will read then, notwithstanding a provision of law, rule, or regulation, policy or procedure, pay plan or compensation plan to the contrary, the salaries of all elected and appointed officials, and along with that amendment is that then in the Exhibit A, the list of positions, is to add to that the mayors of Guam.
On the amendment to the amendment, so on the ADA amendment to the Senator Urgan's amendment, is there anyone, Senator Rodriguez, on the ADA amendment?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I rise to the objection. At a time when we're closing down police precincts, fire stations, we need our first line, the people in the villages that know our community, know the people who are there, to be able to pick up the slack. And so our mayors do a fine job in doing that, and to in this one effort to just say we're going to reduce your salaries right now, when we had an opportunity to save $15 million right off the bat, I think is just a misplaced, and so I object to the amendment.
On the ADA amendment? On the ADA amendment, is there any objection? Oh, there's been an objection. So all in favor of the ADA amendment to Senator Urgan's amendment, please raise your hand. Motion fails. On Senator Urgan's amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the Urgan amendment? Is there an objection to this amendment? All right, all in favor of the Urgan amendment, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Amendment passes. On the bill, Senator Urgan, you still had the floor. Did you complete? All right, Senator Lee, on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Senator Lee. Forgive me. I'm sorry, Senator Morrison. Yeah. You are recognized, Senator Morrison, on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, it's clear that the federal tax cut is it's impacting our cash flow, our government revenues. And I know we've stated that many times. And the only positive I can see that we're getting out of this, sessions after sessions after sessions, is that we are seeing proposals put in place, bills are being introduced. That's a good thing, but those are seem to be mid to long-term proposals, and that's a good thing. And I think we're addressing what's being proposed in the fiscal realignment, and I appreciate the senators that are moving forward with some of the recommendations. It seems like we're trying to decide what will hurt the most, Madam Speaker. Raising revenue by way of a temporary, sensible tax increase, or continue to not have an immediate legislative solution, and therefore pressure our government to continue with the necessary cuts it needs to make to address the $67 million shortfall. Madam Speaker, it's unconscionable that anyone will believe that a $67 million impact reported by our OFB will not have an impact regardless of what we're doing with these micro cuts, trying to shut down our legislative branch, shut down the governor's office. It will still, it's trickle in. There's no way that this is going to save or stop the bleeding that will continue to further deplete our resources and continuing to go into our essential services, education, public safety. We all know that the general fund is continuously subsidizing our hospitals, so eventually our health care services will continue to get worse. Madam Speaker, we need to do both. We need to do both. And I believe there's no way around this. There's no way around this. We need to put in a temporary sales or tax in place. Again, I'm being very clear, temporary, because it seems like our people have been, with all the information been put out there, it seems like this is going to be a permanent solution. I believe a sensible tax increase and continue to assist this government either through the fiscal realignment that was provided to us, or whatever necessary proposals to continue to enhance revenues or make the necessary cuts to this government. But that's not going to happen overnight, Madam Speaker. What we're seeing here, Madam Speaker, is we're forcing this government to make the cuts that we don't agree with. And I really feel as the day continues and we don't have a legislative solution or anything that would assist this government, we're going to be back here probably calling in whatever the agency that is impacted and possibly interrogate them on why they had to do what they had to do. When you look at this fiscal realignment, Madam Speaker, and you're seeing this, obviously, every agency is going to be impacted. And that's why I was basically pointing out that it's unconscionable for us to believe that this will not continue to trickle into our essential services. The chiefs pointed out that they had to address this now and not wait later. But you know, I appreciate the sentiments of my colleagues of what they shared regarding those decisions that were made. The economic situation we are in shouldn't support us being anti-sensible tax. Maybe we are not doing our job, Madam Speaker, of educating our community, helping them to understand what this government is faced with. I do hope the federal tax cut spurs economic growth. I do hope it does as what a lot of experts believe will do, but I believe that's going to take time, and hopefully that benefits Guam as well. I was listening to a good friend, Mr. Carlos Camacho, over the radio the past days. I think we all know he's an expert, or he has expertise in finance, but what's very important and what makes him credible in what he was sharing, Madam Chair, is he deals with a lot of low income folks, and how he puts programs in place to address those that are in need of either housing or other programs to help them afford a home. So he deals with these individuals. He was focusing on not too much on the corporate business tax benefits. He instead was focusing on families, individuals, and household tax filers. He explained that the tax comparison, or the tax rate between 2017 and 2018, there's an average of a 3% across the board savings. He took this average savings, which amounted to a $2,000 savings per household. So if we did a sales or a BPT tax, and we used the food and groceries analogy, because everybody has been talking about the food analogy, and using the USDA food consumption per household on Guam, which averages around $900, food being one category of expense aside from fuel, medicine, utilities, etc., and we applied the sales combined with a BPT tax to that, which amounts to a $52 a hit per month on their grocery, times 12 equals $627 in additional tax benefit. Bear in mind the 4% BPT is already has been paid in the past. Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, what we need to do instead of creating this climate of shock of a price increase is instead educate our families about the other side of the tax benefit, that a majority of them will be getting a $2,000, as Mr. Camacho pointed, benefit from Uncle Sam. And all we're asking our people is to help their government neutralize this loss. So when we take the $600 off the $2,000 new tax benefit, families will still have a tax benefit around $1,400 left. So we do the simple math, Madam Chair. We are not impacting anyone's base salary. We are only impacting the tax benefits families receive. And this is why I stated that a 2% BPT earlier is a sensible tax increase. And I put sensible in there because, Madam Chair, I think what we've been putting out there and shocking our community of the prices are going to inflate. Madam Chair, when we did liquid fuels tax that was established around the 70s and 80s, the prices inflated over $4 before we even adjusted it. But we needed to do something, and I appreciate the courage that this body had to find to address this infrastructure that this whole community needs that's been neglected for decades. But I pointed out this analogy, Madam Chair, and I wanted to spend time on it. I was listening to Mr. Camacho on this, and I believe as we go through our hearings, he does have other, I don't want to spend too much time on other analogies, but he's pointed even out, we factor in other impacts, because I know household, not only focusing on food, but fuel prices and water, all these things are, you know, the taxpayer, the individual, will still be realizing a savings without impacting their base salary. So I wanted to spend a little time on that so our people are educated a little bit more about this on the other side of this tax benefit. and not only seeing the view that the prices are going to fly up, and and what we're trying to do is instead what we're trying to do is neutralize this whole impact as a result of this federal tax cut. So I hope, Madam Chair, that that analogy will help my colleagues, help our community see what we're intending to do here with this massive impact as a result of this cut. So I'm hoping that we can reconsider this amendment. I have an amendment here. Madam Chair, if I could proceed with the amendment.
Please, Senator Morrison.
So, Madam Chair, I shared that analogy, and I thank Mr. Camacho for providing some feedback on this tax benefit, and hopefully, many of our people were listening to how he believes it will eventually plan out without impacting our community or our families, our tax filers' base salary. So the amendment, Madam Speaker, I know, understand I introduced this before, but because Bill 245 is resubmitted by the governor, I'm attempting, Madam Chair, to address this amendment once again. And basically what it does, Madam Chair, is it reduces the amount by 0.5 down to 5.5%, and the effective date will be March 15, or at least the BPV rate will go into effect, the new rate, and it shall remain in effect to September 15, and no less than 0.55% of the 1.5 BPT adjusted shall be allocated to the Guam Memorial Hospital. Immediately after such date, the tax levy shall revert to the amount implemented prior to the enactment of this act. So I hope not only with the analogy, Madam Chair, that also with the fact that we have some proposals that we know are in motion that will take some time with the sales tax proposal, another or fee enhancement that my colleagues would look to this amendment and hopefully support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Morrison, could you please just clarify? So your amendment, the date, but the part about no less than 0.5%, is that meant also to amend then on page 8, line 22, which allocates 0.75%?
On page 8, amendment section 3, Madam Chair?
I'm referring now to section 4, line 22, where there's already an allocation for GMH.
Eventually, Madam Chair, that will have to be adjusted, but we were reducing it by 0.5, the BPT by 0.5. I'm hoping that this will be a compromise. I know the governor's proposal calls for 2% for a one-year sunset, and amending it to 0.5 or 5.5, and of the 1.5 BPT increase be allocated to the Guam Memorial Hospital. Madam Chair, if I continue,
Please,
the reason why
you may continue.
we continue to try to ensure that we fund our hospital is We all know that this proposal, prior to the federal tax cut, has been the issue for many, almost 2 years, that we've been trying to address regarding the governor's proposal, even with the understanding that this has been an issue for many decades, where the general fund has been subsidizing our hospital. It's hard to say that we're stabilizing the general fund knowing that our hospital is still reliant on our general fund. And I'm sure I just hope we can package this and address what we know has been the issue far too long before the federal tax cut, and I hope my colleagues will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. On the Morrison amendment? On the Morrison amendment, is there anyone who wishes to be recognized? Senator Torres, you're recognized.
I just want to confirm with the proffer of this amendment, the date I note is extended now from the proposed March 31st, 2019, and it's proposed to be extended to September 15, 2019. Is that correct? As opposed to the fiscal year of 2018?
That's correct.
Okay, no further questions.
All right. On the amendment, Senator Urgan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You know, Madam Chair, I understand the intent of the mover of the amendment, and that's to try to find I'd say a quick fix to the financial situation and challenges of the government of Guam. But I'm always reminded, Madam Chair, when this whole proposal was initially proffered, how it would impact the community. Whether it's a 6-month time frame with an increase in taxes for business privilege tax, whether it's 1 year, whether it's 2 years, this idea is that it's short term, quick infusion of cash, will continue to keep our government operating. But it's an inflationary mechanism, Madam Chair. We've discussed this issue before, that once the BPT increases the cost of goods and services in the community and it reverts back to whatever figure, to 4%, prices are going to continue to remain stable at what they were or what they would be based on the increase. And I'm reminded about our everyday people, Madam Chair, who live paycheck to paycheck. I'm reminded about our retirees who live on fixed income. And I'm reminded about the small businesses that are barely making it. And they're looking at this and saying and asking, please do not support a tax increase. And there was a statement a little earlier about looking at trying to piecemeal, I guess, the cost reductions. We're talking about the reduction of pay for the governor, the lieutenant governor, the senators realized about $500,000 reduction just for the senators alone. We're talking about the amendment that was just proffered would realize another $500,000. That's what it's about. It's about methodically making decisions such as those so that we can balance the cost of government versus transferring the cost to our people. And again, I look at what has transpired in the last 60 days. We saw an increase in gas by 15 cents a gallon. We saw the liquid fuel tax increase, and that was mentioned by the sponsor of this amendment. We also saw an increase in power by 15%. We saw an increase in water as of February 1st. And it kind of concerns me when we look at this as the first option, rather than trying to look at other ways in which we can realize some cost reductions so that proposals that will be publicly heard tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, we come back to this body and look at entertaining a number of those, they may be able to offset and address the financial needs of this government rather than implementing a BPT tax, which is going to be inflationary in nature and really affect, Madam Chair, the people that I just alluded to. Ideally, I would prefer that they keep whatever the tax reform measure has put back into their pockets, because that would help them. But enough said, Madam Chair. I understand where the sponsor of the amendment is coming from, and I certainly share some serious concerns about it, and I stand in opposition to the proposed amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the Morrison amendment? On the Morrison amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized? If not, Senator Morrison, you may close, or Senator Espadon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The mover of this amendment, I think, is basically just reiterating a fact that we all know to be true. That this government, because of the new tax act out of Congress, is basically going to suffer $65 million less in revenue than we anticipated. $65 million. The previous speaker, again, was saying, which we've been saying all along also, that there has got to be greater cost containment within our government. This is an opportunity, actually. Through this crisis, this becomes an opportunity to really kind of reconfigure the spending of this government. And over the past week or two or three, however long we've been here, I've kind of lost track, right? There have been concessions made by the administration that to really pare down the cost of government from that 67, what they're going to do is really take a look at about $30 to $37 million in cost containment. And that leaves basically, once we do that, or when we do that, then that really leaves the revenue reductions because of this new tax, federal tax placed upon us, to in the neighborhood of $30 million to $37 million. And again, I kind of broke that down yesterday or the last time we were in session. So this amendment now recognizes that, but also now instead of talking about a 2-point difference, going from 4% to 6% on the BPT, is now saying let's do a 1.5%. So it'll be, now the BPT, instead of being 4%, will be 5.5%. In essence, to make it clear to anybody who's watching out there, if you're buying $100 worth of goods, right now, before any increase, you are charged $4 on top of that for that $100 worth of merchandise. What this proposal does is say, well, instead of $4 for every $100 that you now spend, instead of giving $4 to BPT tax, business privilege tax, you'll now give, instead of $4, you'll now give $5.50, an increase of about $1.50 towards BPT. It's not necessarily going just for the $67 million revenue shortfall that we're going to see from this federal tax that just passed. What this is now proposing is that we're going to address the two problem childs that has been put forth by the administration. One is the cash crunch because of the taxes, the new tax law, and the other one is the shortage of funds at GMH. And even GMH, I'm not even sure just yet what that figure is that they should be at. Because if there is mismanagement, if there are a lot of structural changes that need to be made at GMH, that needs to be discussed a little bit more. It may not be $30 million that they need every year. It might be, and I would suspect, less if they have their management practices in place. Because if you really think about it, if you just take a look at the top 2 salaries of the administration at the hospital, they're way up there. I mean, including their benefits and everything, I believe the administrator gets 200-something thousand, 250, so maybe even a little higher. The CFO gets, with benefits, $200-some thousand. Again, structural changes that need to be made. And yes, they might want to say we're comparing it to the U.S. standards, but in all this time, they haven't brought the hospital up to U.S. standards, so what are we even talking about? I would like to make an amendment to this amendment, and it's a little bit difficult because we're not bifurcating the issues. There are 2 issues in this amendment. One is to raise the BPT, and the other one is to change the date. Those are 2 different issues, right? So, but since we're handling it all as one, I would like to even go further on our compromise, or maybe less on our compromise, I should say. And instead of raising the BPT to 5.5, I move that we go for a 1-point increase, and the BPT increase will be from 4% to 5%. So it would be a 1-point increase. And instead of going all the way to the end of next fiscal year, which is September 2019, I say we go with the exact same date that the governor suggested, which would be 1 year from today. That 1 year allows us to go ahead and, for the next 5 months, or 5 or 6 months that we might see any monies coming in for the fiscal year, really it's basically at 1 percentage point increase, we will see about $25 million in revenues from that increase. And that will also give us the time to really, and then once we get to the end of the fiscal year, let's not forget that come October, November, December, this government also has obligations, at least in the budget bills and in the history that we've done. There comes the COLA payments, they're going to have to go out, and many others. And then there's also the bond debt that we're going to have to pay on certain dates and whatnot. So to me, if we extend it too far out, we might be lulled into some complacency. However, we also need to understand that at the end of this calendar year, actually at the very beginning of the next calendar year, there's going to be a whole new administration in place, a whole new administration. And there's going to be a whole new set of legislators in place. Excuse me. So even though I'm more in favor of a shortened timeline, in fact, I was willing to go to the end of the fiscal year, I understand the realities. Because at the end of this fiscal year, once we start the next fiscal year, a bunch of payments are going to have to be made. And that revenue stream has got to continue. And then once we change the administration and once we change this body, the makeup of this body, and if there'll probably be a lot of new candidates to come in because of the vacancies that are going to be available, for them to be able to make wise decisions in a very short period of time, I think is unrealistic. Because these issues before us and the fiscal understanding are really, that is necessary to make intelligent decisions really takes a lot of learning and understanding. And I'm not sure that within the first month or two that a new set of legislators will be able to come to that. So my amendment is to, instead of going all the way to 5.5, is to really increase the BPT to 5%, and instead of going all the way to the end of next fiscal year, stick within that 1 year period from March to March. And in the meantime, over the course of the next several weeks and months and however long it takes before the end of our term, we need to continue to figure out what other cost containments we can achieve within the government, as well as what other revenue enhancements that we could create. That way we could not only bolster the shortfall that is also going to affect next fiscal year, but also may be able to assist GMH once they have a full understanding of what their real need is. So my amendment, Madam Speaker, I will repeat, is to raise the BPT instead of the 5.5, but bring it to 5%, right? And then to make that effective for just 1 year, which will end on March 1st, 2019. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Espadon. I'm just thinking we might need to bifurcate this with that type of an amendment because, but all right, we'll just go with the Espadon amendment. The Espadon amendment is to amend this amendment, amend 5.5 to now read 5, and amend September 15, 2019 to read March 1, 2019, and to delete the next sentence that has a double underline regarding the GMH. On the Espadon amendment, would anyone like to speak? Senator Morrison.
Madam Chair, can we take a 1 minute recess?
Yes, 1 minute recess. We're back in session. Senator Espaldon, you had the floor. Oh no, Senator Morrison, you had the floor on the Senator Espaldon's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of the amendment, Madam Chair. I appreciate my colleague's suggestion that we could bifurcate this or work towards a solution for our hospital. And, you know, I appreciate the comments being made that, you know, that we took on a side or a sidebar with my colleagues. So I hope we can get 8 votes to support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is it all right then if we, are you going to withdraw your amendment and we would just go with this one?
Point of order,
And we'll incorporate the rest of the language?
this is an amendment to the amendment, though, Madam Chair.
Yes, but you, in effect, your amendment will remove the line no less than 0.5%, correct?
Right.
And
Yeah,
it will proceed with the rest. I mean, we'll incorporate the rest of the strikeouts.
Right.
It will also require a technical amendment to delete section 4.
Right, and that's the difficulty with the way we're handling everything right now, is because all the sections and all the pages have something that once we change the rate of any kind, right, and even the date, everything else has to be changed. But I think in the concept itself, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, the governor had put forth one figure of 2 points increase and a 2-year or a 1 year. And so, again, any change that we make would there would have to be at least technical corrections made by legal counsel to reflect the will of this body.
All right, well, Senator Morrison, then, would you are you withdrawing your amendment? And we'll incorporate the strikeouts into the Espaldon amendment? Or it's up to you. Okay. Otherwise, when this amendment, if this amendment passes, what's going to be less is just the strike-throughs. I mean, you know, the bottom part of the first A. Part A and Part B strike-throughs.
You know, yes, and now we're just getting real technical. And again, maybe there's a way we can solve this, and well, legal counsel's not here. But again, the whole gist of it is, you know,
I understand. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I think. Could you please consider consolidating your amendments? If you have no objection to his amendment, then I think, yeah, you might want to consolidate them. Correct? So that the new amendment, Espaldon amendment, will now change the percentage to 5. It will leave March 15, 2018. It will change September 15 to March 1, 2019. And it will delete the next sentence that has a double underline regarding GMH. It will include all the strike-through to the end of Part A. And it will include the strike-through in Part B and change the number 5.5 to 5 in Part B. Correct? It will also remove Section 4 altogether. Section 4 of the bill. Is that correct?
Okay, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, perhaps we need a little bit more of a recess to really talk about, because now we're just talking procedural stuff. You know, and again, my amendment was proffered more as a substantive measure, and now the issue is how do we proceed. So maybe this doesn't necessarily have to go that route. Maybe if we just kind of take a recess, then we can figure out what is the best method to handle this.
Well, he has no objection to your amendment. So we can vote on your amendment, but it's going to require that council is very clear that your amendment includes deletion of the sentence regarding GMH. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And I believe council can then make technical amendments after that. Wait, I think consolidation's better, but I'm going to give you 1 minute we'll take a 1-minute recess.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
recommending you consolidate these two amendments.
Okay,
Thank you.
and legal counsel just walked in, maybe he can help us.
We're back in session. Senator Espadon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that time. At this time, I would like to withdraw my amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Espadon. Senator Morrison, on your amendment, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you and legal counsel, my colleagues, for working with me to get the language corrected here. So, Madam Chair, if I could proceed,
Would you like to withdraw your original
yes,
amendment?
Madam Chair, I will withdraw my amendment.
All right. Senator Morrison, and do you have another amendment to proffer?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. Please proceed.
Madam Chair, the amendment would read, Section 3 of the bill to read, the increased BPT rate of 5% shall be immediately effective March 15, 2018, and implemented following the enactment of this act by Liheslaturan Guåhan, and it shall remain in effect until March 31st, 2019. Immediately after such date, the tax levied shall revert to the amount implemented prior to the enactment of this act. Item B would reflect the changes, Madam Chair, from 6% to 5%. And that's my amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there another section to that amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to delete Section 4 of the bill and to allow legal counsel to make technical corrections accordingly.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. On the Morrison amendment, Senator Urgan, you are recognized on the Morrison amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I was just in discussion with one of the movers of the amendment, and one of the concerns I really have, and I stated my reservations with regards to any tax increase. But one of the concerns I really have is in looking at this particular legislation in totality as a whole, it really does not have any imposition of the governor's or the implementation of the governor's fiscal realignment plan that proposed in his plan a reduction of $47 million. But then through further discussions, I believe on Sunday, that particular figure was recognized as more or less a $37 million cost reduction on the part of the fiscal realignment plan. So, Madam Chair, I just want to stress that, you know, if we are entertaining an adjustment and increase based on the proposal 1% increase in BPT, we really have to show our people that their government is also containing costs. So I ask you and I ask our colleagues for the opportunity to be able to entertain such a measure. I know one of the previous movers of the amendment had proffered something in previous discussions, and we're trying to resurface that so that in fact this would be a balanced presentation, assuring the people of Guam that their government is going to realize some cost reductions, real cost reductions for the balance of the fiscal year in exchange for asking them to make this contribution in terms, or to look at any adjustment in the BPT that could conceivably result in increased costs. So Madam Chair, I ask you and our colleagues for consideration in terms of possibly entertaining such a measure should this amendment pass. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Urgan. Senator San Nicolas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some sentiments to express with respect to the amendment, but first I have a question for the mover of the amendment. What is happening in March 2019 that's going to magically allow for us to make up for the revenue shortfall and sunset this tax increase?
Senator Morrison, do you yield to this question?
Madam Chair, we've been tossing around different dates for some time. We've talked about a 2-year sunset, a 1-year sunset, a June 30th sunset, September 30th. It's always been that issue or that we couldn't resolve. The governor has proposed and has a compromise to a 1-year sunset, and the administration officials feel that with that time, it would allow them or bridge that or stopgap and allow for these other measures or other proposals that are in place that we are in agreement to work on immediately. And that was the administration's request that came down. Actually, as a matter of fact, just I believe recently with the officials here, that they stated that 1 year was ample time to work with. But you know, Madam Chair, I believe with the collaboration that we're having here with our colleagues and the proposals that are put forth and the bills that are introduced, I really believe that this sunset, March 31st, we may not even get to that point. I appreciate my colleagues' thoughts of this date, but this was the date that was provided by the administration.
Senator San Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the answer from the author, which basically says that there's nothing really on the table right now that's going to happen in March 2019. It's really just a date that we're pulling out of the air to try and kite this problem forward until next calendar year. I don't see the logic in that. I don't see the logic in that because we're not actually providing a solution. Everyone keeps talking about solutions. This is not a solution. This isn't even a Band-Aid solution. And I say that because if we reference the OFB summary of impacts on the government of Guam tax revenues for FY 2018, I believe everybody may have a copy of this. If not, we can provide one. But they gave us the breakout as requested in our last meeting before we recessed. The shortfall for this fiscal year is $67 million. If we were to factor that for the entire fiscal year, the shortfall is actually $104 million for a full 12-month period. So until we are very clear as to what's going to make up for this sunsetting of the BPT that's being proposed in this amendment, it's very, very premature for us to consider sunsetting something when we have no idea what's going to make up for that gap. And what's even worse, Madam Chair, and that's why one of my colleagues was the original mover of this idea of a sunset. I've been against it from day one. Because what happens is when we implement this tax increase and prices rise, after they sunset, the prices won't go down, the shortfall will still be there, and then what do? We raise another tax somewhere with these prices already elevated? Or do we pass a new tax increase at that point in time in March 2019 that's going to just be another justification for, again, another price increase? And what's concerning me about this amendment is it's symptomatic of the circumstances that we're being put in. We're being put into a box. We're not being allowed to come up with our other alternatives. And we're being put into a box and we're trying to compromise our way out of it. We don't need to be in this box. There are many other avenues that we're trying to work on in between all of this time being spent in here. And the reason why we need to explore these other avenues, Madam Chair, is because this process that we're going through is nothing new. Puerto Rico's been through this. When they were first facing their fiscal challenges, they started borrowing for operations. The record will reflect that this government has done that over these last several fiscal years. After they exhausted their ability to borrow for operations, the most recent proposal from the administration was the TRAN borrowing. After Puerto Rico exhausted its ability to borrow for operations, they started raising taxes. And where did they raise the taxes on? They raised the taxes on the businesses. And the businesses started closing their doors and leaving Puerto Rico. And that death spiral resulted into where they are today. We are following that very same playbook. We've been, and any tax increase that's going to create a more constrained business environment is just going to exacerbate the problem. The suggestion that somehow sunsetting it in a year is going to provide cost of living relief to our people is a fallacy. And we've seen that in the history of this very island when we've raised the BPT before years ago and rolled it back under so much pressure, prices did not go down. Everybody in this room knows that. Everyone on this island knows that. So to talk about a sunset is a false promise, especially in light of the fact that we have not even conceptualized where that sunset shortfall is going to be made up. So I'm very leery about supporting this amendment and any increase in the BPT. I'm concerned that this half step is somehow going to be viewed as acceptable given the duration of the proceedings that we've been through so far. And it's going to be one of those things where instead of amputating both of our arms, they're going to just cut off one and tell us that we should be happy with that. There are alternatives. We are working on them. We need the opportunity to present them. I think a lot of our colleagues in here will be very excited to see what the possibilities are. But we won't get there if we remain stuck here. So I object to the amendment, not because I don't want a lower tax rate, but because I don't want us to go down this path. This is not the path. This path has already a proven track record in Puerto Rico and on this island to result in financial catastrophe and a permanently increased cost of living, both of which our people have charged us with making sure does not happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esteves, you are recognized on the Morrison amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm looking at the amendment. I think is a fair compromise to a lot of the discussions that has taken place over the last couple of weeks by members present in this body. Madam Chair, we have seen in the past that increases in the BPT have remained even with the reduction in statute. And so I do understand that there are concerns amongst colleagues about the prices actually going down. And that's why I think a 1% increase as a compromise is beneficial. Based on my research, Madam Speaker, it might not be the politically popular thing to say, but Guam can afford it. And the reason being is the fact still remains. You can't compare us to Puerto Rico or the States, because on Guam, the island of Guam, Madam Chair, 1/3 of the workforce does not pay into income taxes. They get money back. Most of them get money back through EITC to the tune of $75 million. And what we haven't even talked about is if you look at the new tax plan, the threshold's gone up. So more people are going to be getting EITC. Money goes in, but comes right back out. And that's not including other deductions. So how many options does this government have to provide services at a loss? I come from the private sector, Madam Chair. You have that flexibility and you have to survive because you need to make a profit to survive and to pay your employees. But you can't compare the government to that. The government will always provide services to the people at a loss. Unless we wanted a model where you pay as you go, and then which the people in the lowest rungs of our society and the poor will definitely be at a disadvantage because only the rich and those who have money could afford services. But the fact remains, about 1/3 of our workforce does not pay into income taxes, yet this government provides a service to everybody, as it should. But that comes at a cost, a shared cost. And so whether it's a 1% GRT increase temporarily, whether it's a sales tax or other provisions, we have a responsibility to ensure that the government is running for the benefit of all of the people, rich or poor, because that's what our responsibility is. We don't have many options for this government to realize revenue. But all this is, it's one measure in which people can pay their fair share. It's non-discriminatory because it applies to everyone. I don't personally really care for a GRT increase. I think there are better ways we can fine-tune it to the benefit of the people. But the situation we are in is the situation we presently are faced with. Because people forget that businesses need the government. With the 32-hour work week looming, payless paydays, reduction in force. You tell me if you were a real estate invested in real estate and you're trying to complete a transaction as a real estate agent and you can't get the title complete, you can't get your commission, you're going to go out of business. You're going to lose your house. Or if you have to stand at rev and tax for over a day because time is money in the private sector. So right now, yes, I hear it. We don't want taxes to go up. I get it. But that's only really because we haven't seen the other side of that when services are diminished. And we understand, everybody in here understands that being in the seat is always a lose-lose situation because we're going to get attacked for letting services lapse, and we're going to get attacked for increased taxes. But to roll this all back in, historically, the reason we're here today is because when it was made and determined objectively, Madam Chair, that things needed to be paid for and taxes needed to be increased, back then, the legislature did not have the political will to stick it through and stand their ground. And so there were two mistakes made, I believe. Raising the taxes and then going back on them. Because now the prices stayed up. And we didn't have the revenue to invest in the problems we are still facing today. And so when I look at this amendment and the work that's been put in by this body to get a measure passed to fund the government, I ask only that we understand that it may not be politically popular, and it never is politically popular to increase taxes. But let's learn from the mistakes of the past, and what we do objectively, not politically, for the right reasons. And we don't let the businesses hold us hostage, and we let the market fix itself. We can't legislate because a business is not going to lower their prices. That's not our responsibility. The market needs to adjust itself. What we need to look at, Madam Chair, is what are our responsibilities to the people of Guam, how much it's going to cost, and communicate with our constituents in this time of crisis what they're willing to give up, what we're all willing to give up, or what we're all willing to pay for. That is the juggling act, and that's the responsibility of this body, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steves. On the Morrison amendment? Senator Morrison, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank my colleagues for their contribution to this amendment. I thank my colleague, Senator Espadon, for working with me and providing an alternative. Madam Chair, I do hope this federal tax cut spurs economic growth in time. And I did state earlier that there's no way around this. I believe that we just can't force this government to continue the cuts they have to make the next days, weeks, months ahead. We have to do both, Madam Chair. I sat through here, I've been on island, struggling to see where we can go with this. And it's come to a point where, yes, I appreciate the concerns of my colleagues regarding the closures of some of our stations, our fire stations and precincts. But Madam Chair, we're now facing people or individual families that have lost an income source. I don't know who they are, but it's really hard to go out there knowing that that's happening right now. There's many more LTAs out there, Madam Chair, that could be on the next in line. There's a lot of anxiety out there. I'm asking our community, I'm asking our families, or asking our people that we're trying to neutralize this issue. I just don't like the fact that some are making this sound like it's a permanent solution. It's not. I believe it's a sensible solution at this time, given our situation. We haven't sent anything up to the administration, and I'm hoping my colleagues would support this amendment. We need to send something up to stop this bleeding into our government revenues. Certainly doesn't solve the hospital's issue, but it does provide for some relief with all these potential plans or cutting that is around the corner. So I hope, Madam Chair, we've been through many sessions. I hope this amendment can send something up to the governor and have him sign it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the Morrison amendment, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. On the bill, Senator Lee, you are recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to take an opportunity to thank Chief Jaya Cruz and Chief Joey Siniclus, who were here over the weekend while we were in special session, to answer some of the questions that I had posed with regards to security detail for the offices of the governor and the lieutenant governor. They helped to illustrate that these executive security overtime costs were the greatest overtime costs for the Guam Police Department in fiscal year 2017. These overtime costs made up more than 3/4 of all overtime costs for the entire department, according to documents that were provided to the legislature. The chief was able to help us to illustrate that Hagåtña precinct spent about $58,000 in overtime in fiscal year 2017, while executive security overtime for the governor and the lieutenant governor were $367,000, 6 times more than the Hagåtña precinct. So I guess my question would be, if GPD's budget struggles are so great that it can't afford overtime in the Hagåtña precinct, why are they prioritizing overtime at Adaloop? This is a question, Madam Speaker, of matching your priorities to the budgets that pay for them. And clearly, every single dollar that this body has appropriated to the Guam Police Department is desperately needed to keep our community safe. And I thank my colleagues for appropriating those funds. I want to be very clear, if executive security is necessary, then I'm just asking that the executive branch foot the bill, that the governor's office foot the bill. This is a decision that the governor can make today through his transfer authority. Given that, though, I mean, I'm not positive that he will make that choice. So I'd like to proffer this amendment, and I think it's been distributed to all of my colleagues. And this would be an amendment on page 9 of the bill, line 25, to read, "No funds appropriated to the Guam Police Department for fiscal year 2018 shall be used for the overtime payment of police officers detailed for executive security. Any overtime incurred for executive security shall be paid from amounts appropriated from the office of Liheslaturan Guåhan." And I respectfully request the support of my colleagues in this amendment. Susmasi.
Thank you, Senator. On the Senator Lee's amendment, is there anyone who wishes to speak? Is there any objection?
Madam Chair, what are we saving here? What?
Senator Lee passed out an amendment last week, and she read it into the record regarding the police officers detailed for executive security. Do you have a copy?
I'm sorry, I don't have that amendment.
You can take a brief recess. It's been copied.
We'll take a Sergeant of Arms, could we get copies? It's been passed out once, but do you have extra copies of this amendment regarding the executive detail? 1 minute recess. They're making more copies. All right, does everybody have a copy now? Senator Morrison on the Lee amendment? Oh.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry. Senator Morrison, did you want to speak on the amendment?
Madam Chair, it's my understanding that it's my understanding with the existing budget that was approved, these funds, overtime funds, have been factored into GPD's budget. So are we going to de-appropriate those monies that is approved in the budget?
Are you asking the sponsor to yield?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator Lee, do you yield to that question?
So the question is that the funds have already been appropriated. Is that correct?
Are we going to de-appropriate? Is that your question? Are we going to de-appropriate overtime?
Yes, Madam Chair. This body approved this overtime that it includes executive security. So I'm just wondering, are we going to also move to de-appropriate these funds that are factored in GPD that was approved by this body?
Madam Chair, it's my understanding that it wouldn't de-appropriate, it just shifts the funding source.
All right. On the Lee amendment, Senator Morrison, would you like to continue? You have the floor.
If the author may yield, Madam Chair, what amount are we going to save here? What's the realized savings with all this?
Senator Lee, do you yield to that question?
I sure do, Madam Chair. So in the last fiscal year, the numbers that we received in this body were that Hagåtña precinct spent $58,000 in overtime. Executive security overtime that was approved was $367,000. So that would be the amounts.
Senator Morrison, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just, again, we're doing these micro cuts. I'm not sure we're getting any closer to understanding that we have a $67 million shortfall. Thank you,
Madam Chair, this amendment is in direct response to the closing down of the precincts. And if that's what we're attempting to do, it might be a little micro cut, but these things have major impacts in our community and major impacts to our families and the people that the Guam Police Department serves. So I'd just like to remind all my colleagues that that's really the...
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Morrison, are you done? Senator Torres, you are recognized on the Lee amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the sponsor can so yield, I'm just wondering if this amendment also contemplates a retroactive component so that all funds expended to date are also reimbursed. It's unclear at what point, because we are well into fiscal year 2018, at what point does this provision kick in terms of monies expended already and monies yet to be expended? That part is understood, but what about monies already expended?
Senator Lee, do you yield?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the previous speaker for the question. It would be my understanding that all money is already spent. This would just be going forward, prospective into fiscal year 2018. But if there's an amendment that any member would like to offer, I'd be open to that.
Senator Torres, you have the floor.
No further inquiry, thank you.
On the Lee amendment, Senator Esteves, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have some concerns with, I don't rise in support or I don't object to the amendment, but I do just want to comment. I believe we had different understandings based on information provided, because what was stated in committee of the whole on public record, unless I did not understand, and I'll go back and I'll review the tapes, I thought it was made very clear that GPD did not have an overtime issue, that the closing of the Hakatnya precinct was to assist Department of Corrections with their overtime issues, since a peace officer is a peace officer under the post standards. And since we are not getting new peace officers in government of Guam because of the freeze as a cost-cutting measure, that shifting of personnel to reduce overall savings to address the $67 million deficit for the FY was one of the austerity measures moving forward, and that it would not affect the mission of the Guam Police Department and their ability to provide services to the people with regards to keeping the public safe. So I will make a commitment to this body to go back and review the public record, but I'm fairly certain that is what was said, and that's what I understood of that information provided. But again, with the amendment, I'm not opposed to it. I think it makes perfect sense that where the funding source should be provided. But with regards to some of the justification provided, I did have to make it very clear. I took something else away from the comments made by the Chief of Police. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. On the Lee amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Lee, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to, again, for the record and for my colleagues, this would affect, it's all general fund. It's all general fund revenues, and that's where our cash shortfall is. And the chief acknowledged that over $350,000 could potentially be saved if we didn't spend this money on executive security overtime. And that's a $350,000 savings based on prior year numbers. So it would lessen the cut that the Guam Police Department would need. And that's really my attempt in moving this amendment. And so I thank my colleagues in advance for their support.
On the amendment, there's an objection. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment passes. On the bill, Senator Lee, would you like to continue on the bill? All right, on the bill, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Senator Esteves, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, if I may, I have an amendment currently being processed and printed out. If it pleases the chair, I could go ahead and speak on it, or I'd like to request a recess until it's been printed and passed out to the body for their review. But I am willing to yield my time for any of my colleagues who want to speak. But just before moving forward, I just wanted to put that on the record that I do have an amendment forthcoming.
All right, thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there any other senator who would like to speak? All right, then we will take a 1-minute recess. Senator Esteves, should that be enough for your amendment to be passed out? All right, 3-minute recess. Thank you. Senator Esteves, you are recognized. Does everybody have a copy of the amendment? It's been passed out. Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposed amendment proposes to deappropriate $255,000 from the Judiciary of Guam from the general fund and reappropriate it to the Department of Education. The $255,000 amount is the prorated amount of $510,000. $510,000, Madam Speaker, is the annual accumulated total of the increase in cost incurred by the general fund for the salary increases in 2014 of the leadership, the upper level leadership of the Judiciary of Guam. Now there was some conventional wisdom provided by one of my colleagues earlier, and it really stuck with me, and I think it really provides a good point that in these times of financial crisis, that the cuts need to start from the top down. And it's the leadership responsibility to assume these cuts for the benefit of everybody below us. And if you look back at the history and where we're at and where we're going, I think majority of the cuts has been from the legislature and the executive branch. And in our system of government, there are three separate and co-equal branches of government, and I believe that burden should be shared. Now, while we cannot mandate statutorily the reduction in the salaries of the judges and the executive leadership of the courts, what we can do is, within our power, the legislature, is remove the funding that provides for that in the hopes that they will do their part in contributing to the government of Guam and its people in these times of financial crisis. My decision to provide the funding sources, Department of Education, is for the mere fact that an adequate education for children reduces the likelihood of criminal activity when they get older. So I think it's very important to remove this from the judiciary as the place we don't want our youth to go for negative reasons, and invest it ahead of time in Department of Education as part of the top 3 priorities of this government: public safety, education. Public safety, education, and healthcare.
Thank you, Senator. On the Esteves amendment, is there any senator who would like to be recognized? Senator Morrison, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, again, no disrespect to my colleagues, but I just want to understand what direction are we taking here? Are we going to proceed in this fashion with these micro cuts? Because I'd like to know the tally of where we at with a result of this $67 million shortfall that we're trying to address. And I just want to know if this is this how we're going to proceed? Is this how we're going to handle our amendments with micro cuts instead? Because we have a fiscal realignment here provided by the administration. I prefer, Madam Chair, that we go back into the budget process, if that's the case, and go through every agency and make the cuts necessary, because it seems like we're already doing that. So unless we have a tally of where we're at with regards to these micro cuts and where are we near the $67 million cut or shortfall? So I'm not, I want to show unfairness on both sides, that I don't understand where we're going with this. And we just got a credit watch before us, and I'm just concerned that maybe we're not grasping the situation here, Madam Chair.
On the Esteves amendment, is there any other senator who would like to be recognized? Senator Espaldon on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as part of the presentation of cost containment, which totaled about $30 million, $15 million, somewhere about that, was going to come from the executive line agencies. The other 15 to 22 million was going to come out of course, DOE, the legislature, and the courts, and which the court has already conceded that they will definitely put that up front, good faith. They could take it away and reduce the salaries of the leadership over there as the move of their amendment proffered, or they might find it elsewhere. You know, this amendment doesn't, even though it deappropriates, it doesn't take it straight from their salaries. It basically just takes another figure on top of what they've already agreed to give, which amounts to, I believe, a couple $1 million. And so this just adds on to the burden of the judiciary. So this is, even though the intent is to almost try to, or expect the judges and the justices and the leadership over there to take a salary cut, because they set their own salaries over there, there's no guarantee that this will even reflect there. And so, like I said, the judiciary has already agreed into the buy-in of containing costs by saying they will definitely cut their budget this fiscal year. This just adds to it without a real direct impact on what it was intended to do, which is to reduce the salaries of the judges and the justices. So with all due respect, I would have to object.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Torres, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just want to add to the discussion that in the February 21st testimony by the judiciary with regards to bills 224 and 225, they did indicate that as a result of the withholding of allotments to the judiciary, they have already begun to cut as much as $3 million from their operating budget. So I just want to put that on the record, that they have in fact already committed to cutting that substantial amount, and that their budget, their total budget, really only represents 5% of the general fund. And considering that they are, if they are in fact a third co-equal branch of government, that is a disproportionate amount of funding to this critical branch of our government. So for the record, they have already, and I just want to note that that fact that was stated in their testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the Esteves Amendment, Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, I support what Senator Esteves brought up, but it's just curious that we're going to take 255 from the judiciary branch and move it to education, while, as the Senator Torres brought up, the judiciary is already reducing by $3 million. But and please, if any of my colleagues can correct me, they identified $500,000 to reduce and not give to DOC to implement the electronic monitoring program that would have saved $4 million at DOC. So I'm trying to understand the math, as Senator Morrison brought up. We're taking a little bit here and there, but there was an identified $4 million that DOC was supposed to save. So I don't know, I may be wrong, and maybe you can clarify if that was true. But I think that maybe, and don't get me wrong, I like what Senator Esteves, because it's for DOE. I support that. But I'm just curious, as anybody wants to say, everybody's taking a bite. Well, let's just take a look at how much of a bite, and following Senator Morrison's statement, if we want to go to the appropriation, then maybe we should consider that and take a look at how everybody's cut and decide from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the Esteves Amendment, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized? Is there an objection? On the amendment, there's an objection. So all in favor of the amendment, please.
Madam
I'm
Chair.
sorry, Senator Esteves, would you like to close? You may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To reiterate, the reason and also further for the repurposing of Department of Education is, when you look at the FRP, there were across the board cuts required in this government for agencies to cut their pro rata share. And in talking with officials from the Department of Education is as much as they're trying, they're not going to be able to meet that amount without it affecting the classrooms. And so maybe it's a micro amount at $255,000, but I think it's very important to try to dedicate it and reduce the impact of what it would have on the classrooms. The same arguments, Madam Speaker, that came before two branches of this government, I posed before the third. With the reduction in the salaries of the senators, reduction in the salaries of the Megalahan, would that prevent any of those officials from doing their job? And so I think the same question should be posed to the judiciary. Maybe they'll reduce their salaries, or maybe they'll find another place to reduce it, in which they didn't keep in good faith with cutting as much as they can. But if they do choose to join the rest of the leadership of this island in reducing their salaries in a way that as soon as the financial situation is better, they can just give it back to themselves without any type of public notice or public hearing. But with regard to that, is that if they're going to join the rest of the leadership of this island in good faith and cut back their salary, it's not going to affect the operations of the judiciary. The same way it didn't affect the operations of the legislature or the executive branch. So I ask my colleagues to consider this amendment, because we can't at some point stand on a principle, and then when that same principle doesn't benefit us, we waver. So I asked for the consideration of my colleagues. I ask that this decision be made for the reasons of objectivity and principle, and not based on politics or bias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, all in favor, please raise your hand. On the amendment? Amendment fails. On the bill, Senator Adai, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, you know, we've had a number of amendments proffered already. Some have passed and some have failed, but it seems that we're kind of ignoring the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is, are we going to come to some kind of an agreement on an increase in the BPT tax? And are we going to come into some kind of an agreement with the sunset date of that increase? And that question was asked earlier, and it failed. And so I'm really kind of not sure that there's any more amendments. I mean, we can make more amendments to this bill, but if we cannot come to an agreement on those two important points, I think we probably need to rise, because so that we can do our work on the other options that are being looked at. Tomorrow there's a public hearing on the reorganization priorities of the government. On Thursday there's a public hearing on the sales tax options. And hopefully during those public hearings we will get subject matter experts to come in and provide us more information on those two very important bills. And so I guess we can go ahead and nickel-dime this bill all night long, but if we don't address those two very important points, I'm not sure we're going to get anywhere. And I just hope that if we rise and adjourn, and whatever the outcome is of the bill, that, you know, we don't get called back into special session, because I believe that we really could better use our time to work on the other options that are being looked at right now. And raising the BPT tax is not the only, it's probably the simplest solution, but it's obviously not something that warms the heart of enough members of this legislature. So with that, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, I would like to move that we rise from the committee of the whole with all the amendments that have been passed kept intact. Did you need a recommendation with that too? And with a recommendation to place the bill in third reading and to vote immediately.
On the motion to rise, with all amendments intact, and with the recommendation to place the bill in third reading and vote immediately, is there any objection? Is there any objection? No objection. We're now in second reading. 1 minute recess. We're back in session. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to report back to the body that Bill number 16S was deliberated and amended in the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to place on the third reading file and vote immediately.
Thank you, Senator. We are now in second reading. I'm sorry, we are now in third reading. No, on the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, is there any objection to adopting the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole? No objection? So ordered. We are now in third reading. Senator, Majority Leader, you are recognized. Regarding the title, you? What about the title? Okay, so we are voting without engrossing, so the clerk will not be reading the title, and we will proceed. Bill 16-S. Correct. Bill 16-S as amended by the Committee of the Whole. Roll call.
Senator Adda. Senator Adda, nay. Senator Urgan. Senator Urgan, nay. Senator Castro. Senator Castro, aye. Speaker Cruz. Speaker Cruz, excused. Senator Espadon. Senator Espadon, nay. Senator Esteves. Senator Esteves, nay. Senator Lee. Senator Lee, nay. Senator Morrison. Senator Morrison, aye. Senator Muña. Senator Muña, aye. Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson, nay. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Rodriguez, nay. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, nay. Senator San Nicolas. Senator San Nicolas, nay. Vice Speaker Chalahi. Vice Speaker Chalahi, nay. Senator Torres. Senator Torres, nay.
On Bill 16-S, there were 3 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 excused. The bill does not pass. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to adjourn this 6th special session.
On the motion to adjourn, Senator San Nicolas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of order in the agenda for this 6th special session. We've exhausted the third reading file, and that would take us to brief extension of remarks prior to a motion to adjourn. So I would humbly request that we entertain an opportunity for a brief extension of remarks.
Senator Adda, would you like to withdraw your motion to adjourn at this moment, at this time? And
Sure, I'll withdraw the motion.
all right, so we are in brief extension of remarks. Is there anyone who would like to extend remarks? Senator San Nicolas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to begin by acknowledging the circumstances to which we are called before the people of Guam once again to try and resolve the financial circumstances of this government as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act federal mandates that have reduced our revenue streams, particularly with our income tax, corporate income tax, and withholding taxes. These last several days, for some of us in this room, these last several weeks, have seen us called into session on numerous occasions and has resulted in a lot of information being provided. At the policy level, we are being charged with presenting or identifying solutions to these challenges that we're facing. And in order for us to provide a solution, we need to have a clear understanding of the problem, and we need to set the parameters necessary for us to craft that solution in a way that's going to satisfy the expectations of the people who put us into office. I believe that in order for us to develop a true solution that addresses the actual problem, we need to contextualize what the problem is. And the problem isn't just the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I believe that that is a tipping point, but I believe that that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act impact was the tipping point of a multi-year journey that saw us initially borrow to pay off tax refunds almost a half-decade ago, budget in a manner that was attempting to be as responsible as possible, but still resulted in a repeat of deficit spending practices. And ultimately, an accrual of vendor liabilities and tax refund liabilities, such that here we are, and the circumstances are very dire. In order for us to solve that structural problem, we need a comprehensive and structured solution. It can't just be a singular tax increase and ignore everything that got us to this point. It needs to be a solution that's going to ensure that we not only address the challenges we're facing immediately, but that in so addressing them, we set our island on a course to not fall into these circumstances again. And I believe that that is the expectation that our people have of us right now. I don't think our people want us to just increase their cost of living with a blanket BPT tax increase and walk away from the problem. I think they want us to resolve the structural issues that have gotten us to this point. In order for us to do that, Madam Speaker, I believe that we need to set several parameters. I think that first, the solution that we ultimately adopt must be something that does not increase the cost of living on the most vulnerable in our community. Our retirees, our people who are living paycheck to paycheck, the working poor, even our middle class that's come under a lot of strain. A second parameter that we need to establish is that we must ensure that the government executes its fair and sustainable share of cost cuts and cost containments. And that is not just for this immediate challenge in this current fiscal year, but that's for the ensuing fiscal years to come. And I believe that a third tenet must be that we draw from this crisis an opportunity to structurally reform our government and tax systems so that out of this, our people have a better quality of life and not a worse one. The option of a BPT increase does not fall within those tenets. It's up to us as policymakers to take the information that we've received over these many days and develop that comprehensive solution, to present that comprehensive solution coherently to our people, and to do so in a way that's going to rally them around the movement and the effort. I believe that our people would accept us taking a multi-year approach that also involves us changing the way we budget, with transparency that shows that over several years we're going to be containing costs and realizing cuts. We're going to, over those several years, be working to grow our economy, grow our revenue base, and as we grow that economy, grow that revenue base, and cut that spending, we're going to be rolling back certain taxes, and we're going to be transitioning our tax environment so that it's more transparent, more business-friendly, better for the economy, better for our working people. We have a lot of information that's going to be at our fingertips to be able to do that now. The recently provided OFB summary of impacts on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the Government of Guam tax revenues clearly illustrates that for this fiscal year, we're talking about a $67 million shortfall, and if we were to just carry this fiscal year's projections forward, we're talking about a $104 million shortfall. Now, the solution that was offered over these past several sessions was just to raise the BPT and be done with it. But what we should do instead, Madam Speaker, is look at the various options that we have and try and figure out how we can cut costs how we can surgically go in and raise revenue without impacting the cost of living for our most vulnerable, and by combining those two efforts, make up this $67 million shortfall this year and this $104 million shortfall in FY 2019, and hopefully move forward with the remaining fiscal years so that we can transition out of a BPT and into a different tax regime. With the help of the administration and the questions from our colleagues on the floor, we've identified that up to $37 million in cuts for FY 2018 can be realized, and that would take the shortfall of this fiscal year down to $30 million, an estimate between 25 and 30 million in our conversation with the administration. So that gives us our starting point. Where do we find that 25 to $30 million, and how do we do it in a way that's not going to hurt our people, not going to raise their cost of living? So I'm rising for a brief extension of remarks, Madam Speaker, because I'm imploring the governor to give us the opportunity to take this information that we have and to do our job in this House and craft the policy. Let us bring forward various policy alternatives, and those alternatives, let us try and figure out which one we're going to be able to wrap our head around and come to a consensus on, at least with a majority of 8 votes. Right now, this BPT increase is a non-starter. It hasn't been for quite some time, and if we continue down this path, it's going to continue not to be. But if the governor can work with us and give us the opportunity to craft the policy necessary, I think that we can come up with some very, very good alternatives that would help us to not only get through this current fiscal year, but to actually turn this crisis into an opportunity and have our people actually get excited about what the future is going to hold with these changes. We can take these hard times, we can take these scary times and turn them into something to look forward to if we're given the opportunity to do that work. So I rise to raise those remarks. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I'm very grateful for all the work that's been done thus far. I know that we can do this, and I know that our people expect us to, and I know that we will deliver if given the opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Is there one other senator who would like to be recognized under extension of remarks? Senator Adda, your majority leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to adjourn this 6th special session.
Is there any objection to the motion to adjourn? No objection, so ordered. We are adjourned.